There are certain truths in the Imperium of man that remain constant across 1,000,000 worlds and 10,000 years of history. The Emperor protects. Duty is its own reward. In death, service continues. But there is another truth, one whispered in the darkness of the Underhive, one that keeps even the most faithful awake in their sleep cycles. It is the truth that there are fates worse than death, horrors so complete and absolute that death would be a mercy long denied. To understand what it means to live on a hive world being consumed by Tyranids, you must first understand what it means to exist in one of humanity's greatest monuments and most terrible prisons. You must comprehend the scale of these towering arcologies, the billions upon billions of souls packed into structures that scrape the very clouds. You must feel the recycled air in your lungs, taste the corpse starch on your tongue, and know that everything you are exists only to feed the endless machine of imperial production. And then, when you understand what it means to barely survive in such a place, you must imagine something infinitely worse. You must imagine an enemy that sees your entire world not as a conquest, not as a prize to be taken, but as nothing more than food. Imagine an intelligence so vast and alien that it spans galaxies, directing countless billions of bioengineered horrors with a single purpose: to consume everything you are, everything you ever were, and everything you ever could be. This is the reality for those who find themselves on a hive world in the path of a Tyranid hive fleet. This is the slow descent into a nightmare from which there is no awakening, no rescue, and no escape. The Tyranids do not conquer, they do not occupy, they devour, and when they are finished, they leave behind only silence and stone. The Imperium catalogues approximately 32,380 hive worlds across its vast domain, though the actual number fluctuates as worlds are lost to Xenos invasions, warp storms, or simple bureaucratic oversight. Each of these worlds represents a crucial component in the Imperial war machine, producing not just weapons and materials, but the most valuable resource of all: human beings. Billions upon billions of potential soldiers, workers, and servants of the Emperor, all concentrated in massive urban sprawls that can be seen from orbit. When the Tyranids come to such a world, they come to a feast beyond imagining. Every single inhabitant represents biomass to be harvested. Every structure, though made of metal and stone, sits upon foundations of organic waste and accumulated biological matter. The very air in these hive cities, recycled through organic filtration systems and breathing plants, contains nutrients that can be extracted and consumed. A hive world is not just a target for the Tyranids. It is a buffet of such magnitude that entire hive fleets will alter their course to reach it. But before we can understand the consumption, we must understand what is being consumed. We must see the world as it exists before the shadow falls, before the sky fills with spores, before the screaming begins. The world that was Hive Primus stands 73 kilometers tall at its highest spire. From the viewing platforms reserved for the planetary governor and his immediate staff, you can see the curvature of the planet itself, the way the ash wastes stretch to the horizon in every direction, broken only by the distant peaks of other hive cities. The air at this altitude is thin but pure, filtered through 100 levels of atmospheric processes, scented with exotic flowers imported from agri-worlds light years away. But you are not standing on those viewing platforms. Few are. The population of Hive Primus numbers somewhere between 47 and 52 billion souls, and fewer than 10,000 of them will ever breathe air that has not passed through 10,000 other pairs of lungs. First, you work in Manufacturum Delta 779, 12 kilometers below the hive's crown and 18 kilometers above its foundations. Your shift began 14 hours ago and will continue for another 6. The work is simple, repetitive, and absolutely essential. You operate a press that stamps out shell casings for heavy bolter rounds, each one precisely calibrated to Imperial specifications that were ancient before your grandfather's grandfather was born. The Manufactorum stretches for kilometers in every direction, a vast chamber carved from the bones of the hive itself. The ceiling disappears into shadows high above, marked only by the occasional flicker of lighting arrays that struggle against the darkness. The floor is a maze of assembly lines, each one tended by hundreds of workers who perform their designated tasks with the mindless efficiency that comes from a lifetime of repetition. The noise is constant, overwhelming, a symphony of industrial fury that makes conversation impossible and renders thought difficult. The clang of metal on metal, the hiss of hydraulics, the grinding of gears, the occasional scream when someone makes a mistake and loses a hand or arm to the machinery. These sounds are the soundtrack of your existence, as familiar as your own heartbeat. The air here is hot and thick with the smell of machine oil, ozone from welding torches, and the peculiar metallic tang of recycled atmosphere that has passed through too many filters without ever seeing the sky. You breathe it without thinking, just as you ignore the ache in your back from standing at your station, the burning in your eyes from staring at the same movement for hours on end, the hunger that gnaws at your belly because the last meal was 8 hours ago and the next is still 4 hours away. This is your life. This is the only life you have ever known, and the only life you will ever know unless injury or age renders you unable to work, at which point you will be recycled like everything else in the hive. Your corpse will be rendered down into corpse starch to feed the next generation of workers, and your bones will be ground into fertilizer for the few remaining food production facilities. Nothing is wasted in a hive city. Nothing can be wasted when billions must be sustained on a world whose surface has long since been rendered uninhabitable by industry. Above you, separated by kilometers of rockcrete and plasteel, the mid-hivers live in relative comfort. They are the administrators, the overseers, the minor nobles who manage the countless systems that keep the hive functioning. They have natural light, piped in through elaborate mirror systems from the surface. They have running water that comes from purification plants rather than condensation collectors. They have food that resembles actual food rather than the grey-brown nutrient paste that sustains the workers below. But even they are nothing compared to those who dwell in the spires, the nobility, the merchant princes, the high-ranking members of the Adeptus Administratum, who coordinate the hive's contribution to the imperial tithe. These privileged few live in a world of luxury that would seem fantastical to someone like you. They have gardens, actual growing things tended by armies of servants. They have windows that look out upon the world beyond the hive. They have access to off-world goods, exotic foods, and entertainments that the masses below can scarcely imagine. And below you, separated by another 18 kilometers of hive structure, lies the underhive. Here, the rule of imperial law has long since broken down, replaced by the brutal hierarchy of gangs and mutant tribes. Here, in the ruins of older construction, in the collapsed sectors and forgotten chambers, humanity reverts to its basest instincts. Here, the weak are prey, and the strong survive only until someone stronger comes along. The population of the underhive is unknown, and probably unknowable. The Adeptus Arbites makes periodic sweeps, culling the numbers when they grow too large, but new inhabitants simply flood in to replace the dead. Some are criminals, fleeing justice in the levels above. Others are simply the unlucky, those who fell through the cracks of imperial society and found themselves in the darkness below. A few are mutants, their genetic corruption making them unwelcome in the higher levels, forced to eke out an existence among the ruins and refuse. This vertical segregation is the natural order of a hive city. Those at the top literally look down upon those below, and those below can only dream of ascending even a single level closer to the light. It is a system that has persisted for thousands of years across thousands of worlds, brutal in its efficiency and absolute in its enforcement. But it is also a system built on a foundation that assumes the Imperium's protection, that takes for granted the relative stability that comes from being just one more world among millions. It assumes that life will continue as it always has, generation after generation, world without end. That assumption is about to be tested in ways that no one in the hive can possibly imagine. Your shift finally ends, and you make your way through the labyrinthine corridors that connect the manufactorum to your hab block. The journey takes 45 minutes, navigating through passages so crowded that you must sometimes turn sideways to squeeze between the press of bodies. The air grows no fresher as you travel. If anything, it becomes worse, thick with the smell of unwashed humanity and the peculiar sourness of recycled water. Your hab unit is a cube measuring 3 meters by 3 meters by 2.5 meters high. You share it with your spouse and 2 children. There is a sleeping pallet that folds down from one wall, a small cooking unit that runs on geothermal power tapped from deep within the hive, and a waste reclamation unit that processes everything into fertilizer for the hive's food production systems. There are no windows, of course. Windows are for those who can afford to have something to look at, and you are 18 kilometers above the surface and 12 kilometers below the spire. There is nothing to see but the corridor outside, which looks exactly like every other corridor in this section of the hive. This is home. This is what you fight to return to each day, what you labor to maintain. It is not much, but it is yours, purchased with your sweat and sanctified by the presence of your family. Your children were born here, and if the Emperor wills it, they will work in the same manufactorum you do, stamping out shell casings for bolters that will be fired on worlds they will never see, in wars they will never comprehend. You eat your evening meal, a portion of corpse starch mixed with protein supplement and flavored with a few precious drops of synthetic seasoning. Your spouse has managed to acquire a small addition of textured fungus protein, a rare treat that makes the meal almost palatable. You share it with your children, watching as they eat with the unconscious hunger of youth, and you feel something that might be contentment. Tomorrow will be the same as today. The day after that will be the same as tomorrow. This is the rhythm of life in a hive city, unchanging and eternal. You have your work, your family, your small corner of the Emperor's Imperium. What more could anyone ask for? You do not know that this is the last normal meal you will ever eat. You do not know that within 3 solar days, the very concept of normalcy will be shattered beyond recognition. You do not know that the sky above the hive, hidden from your sight by kilometers of rockcrete and steel, is already beginning to change. The stars are going out, one by one, obscured by something vast and terrible that approaches from the void. The astropaths in their sanctums high in the spire have begun to scream, their minds overwhelmed by a psychic pressure that builds like a coming storm. The navigators who guide ships through the warp have found their vision clouded, the Astronomican's light dimmed by an interference they cannot name or comprehend. And in the underhive, in the deepest and darkest places where even the gangers fear to tread, things that have lurked in shadow for decades are beginning to stir, responding to a call that echoes across the light years. The Genestealer cults, patient and prepared, feel the approach of their gods and begin their final preparations. The feast is about to begin. The shadow falls. The first sign that something is wrong comes not with violence or obvious threat, but with silence. The Vox systems that connect the hive to the wider world, that carry news from across the sector and beyond, that maintain the constant flow of information necessary for a world of 50 billion souls to function, begin to fail. At first, it is subtle. A delay in receiving the daily, astropathic transmissions from the sector capital, a slight degradation in the signal quality of off-world communications, the kind of thing that might be explained by solar flares or unusual warp currents. But it continues and it worsens. Within 2 days, all astropathic communication has ceased entirely. The messages that do come through are fragmented, incoherent, spoken by astropaths whose minds are clearly fracturing under some unseen pressure. They speak of a darkness in the warp, of something vast and hungry that blots out the light of the Astronomican. They speak of screaming silence and chittering void, of minds that are not minds and thoughts that burn like acid. And then they stop speaking at all. the planetary governor convenes an emergency session of his advisory council. Representatives from the Adeptus Administratum, the Planetary Defense Force, the Adeptus Mechanicus tech priests, who maintain the Hive's infrastructure, and the local ecclesiarchy gather in the great council chamber high in the spire. The air is thick with incense and tension, and for the first time in living memory, there is genuine fear in the eyes of those who rule. The chief astropath, when he is brought before the council, is barely recognizable as human. His eyes weep blood, and his hands shake with a tremor that speaks of neurological damage. When he speaks, his voice is a broken whisper that somehow carries through the chamber. "The stars are screaming," he says. "The warp is drowning in alien thoughts. Billions upon billions of minds, none of them human, all of them hungry. They are coming. Emperor, preserve us. They are coming, and there is nothing we can do to stop them." The governor demands clarification, demands specifics, demands to know what enemy approaches and when it will arrive. But the astropath can provide no useful intelligence. The psychic interference is too great, the shadow in the warp too complete. He knows only that something vast and terrible approaches, something that drowns out all other psychic signals like a scream, drowning out a whisper. And then, as the council debates and argues and struggles to understand what this means, the astropath begins to laugh. It is a horrible sound, broken and wrong, and it continues even as blood runs from his nose and ears. His laughter ends only when his heart stops, the strain of whatever he has experienced proving too much for his enhanced physiology to withstand. In the sanctums where the other astropaths dwell, protected by wards and psychic shields, similar scenes are playing out. Of the 17 astropaths assigned to the Hive, 12 die within the first 3 days of the Shadow's arrival. The 5 who survive do so only by severing their connection to the warp entirely, rendering themselves useless for their intended purpose, but preserving their sanity and their lives. For the common people of the Hive, these events are unknown. You go to work, you come home, you sleep and wake and work again. But there are small changes that begin to accumulate, details that individually mean nothing but collectively paint a picture of something wrong. The daily announcements that play through the Hive's public vox systems, usually filled with imperial propaganda and productivity quotas, become shorter and less frequent. The overseers in the manufactorums seem nervous, distracted, and more than usually harsh with those who fail to meet their quotas. There are whispers of supply shipments that have failed to arrive, of warehouses that are beginning to run low on essential materials. And then there are the dreams. You wake in the middle of your sleep cycle, your heart pounding, your mind filled with images that dissolve like smoke when you try to grasp them. You dreamed of hunger, vast and all-consuming, of teeth and claws and endless appetite. You dreamed of the sky falling, of walls melting like wax, of your children screaming as something unseen dragged them into darkness. You tell yourself it was just a nightmare, stress from increased quotas perhaps, or bad protein supplement in your last meal. But when you speak to your spouse, you learn that they too had troubled dreams. And when you arrive at work, you overhear others speaking of similar experiences. The dreams are spreading through the Hive like a disease, touching everyone, regardless of their station or position. The tech priests of the Adeptus Mechanicus have a different perspective on the changes occurring. Their augmetic sensors detect shifts in electromagnetic fields, unusual patterns in the Hive's power distribution, subtle variations in the planet's magnetic field that have no natural explanation. Their most sensitive instruments pick up what they describe as background noise in every frequency, a kind of static that should not exist. Some of the more knowledgeable among them recognize the signs. They have read the reports from other worlds, other sectors, other times when the Tyranids came. They know what the shadow in the warp represents, what it means when the stars go silent and the warp becomes thick with alien thought. They make their recommendations to the planetary authorities, urging immediate mobilization of all military forces, evacuation of non-essential personnel, and a request for imperial assistance. But who can they ask? The astropaths are dead or useless. No ship can safely navigate the warp when the shadow falls so heavily. They are alone, cut off from the Imperium that is supposed to protect them, isolated on a world that has become a target for an enemy they cannot yet see. In the spires, the nobility begins to panic. Some make arrangements to flee off-world, bribing void ship captains to take them through the warp, despite the danger. A few succeed, their vessels disappearing into the immaterium and never being heard from again, their fate unknown and unknowable. Most find that the ships they had counted on have already departed, their captains unwilling to risk their vessels and crews for any price. Those who cannot flee begin to fortify. Private armies are expanded, security measures are enhanced, and stockpiles of food and water are secured behind reinforced doors. The wealthy have always known that the masses below might rise up if pushed too far, and now they prepare for that eventuality, even as they remain ignorant of the true threat that approaches. In the Underhive, the gangs feel it too, though they lack the education to understand what they sense. The mutants and the outcasts, those whose altered genetics make them more sensitive to psychic phenomena, huddle in their dens and speak of doom approaching. Some flee deeper into the ruins, seeking shelter in levels so old that they remember when the planet still had a sky that could be seen. Others prepare to fight, not knowing what they will fight or when it will come, only that something is coming and that hiding will not save them. And in the deepest, most forgotten places of the Underhive, in chambers sealed for centuries and forgotten by all but a few, the Genestealer cults gather. They have waited for this moment for generations, ever since the first pure-strain Genestealer found its way into the Hive aboard a merchant vessel and began its patient work of infection and reproduction. The cult has grown slowly, carefully, seeding itself throughout the Hive's population. The first generation of hybrids were monstrous things, barely able to pass for human, relegated to the darkest corners of the Underhive. But each subsequent generation became more human in appearance, able to move freely through Hive society, to take positions of minor authority, to spread the infection further. By now, the cult numbers in the hundreds of thousands spread across all levels of the Hive. There are cultists among the factory workers, among the Adeptus Administratum clerks, among the enforcers of the Adeptus Arbites. There are even a few among the nobility, their genetic corruption hidden by wealth and privilege, their true nature known only to their patriarch and the alien will that guides them all. For years they have waited, preparing for the day of ascension, when their gods would come to deliver them from the oppression of the Imperium. They have stockpiled weapons in hidden caches throughout the Hive. They have identified key targets, strategic locations that will need to be secured when the time comes. They have infiltrated the PDF and know the positions of every major defensive emplacement. And now, as the shadow in the warp grows stronger, as the psychic call of the Hive fleet echoes in their minds like a trumpet blast, they know their time has come. The Patriarch, ancient and massive, its psychic power swollen by decades of growth, sends out the signal that they have all been waiting for. The uprising begins. The enemy within it starts in the manufacturing districts, in the vast complexes where billions labor to produce the materials that feed the imperial war machine. Workers who have seemed normal, even exemplary, suddenly turn on their fellows with a savagery that is both shocking and coordinated. They move with purpose, with unified intent, targeting overseers and enforcers first, then anyone who attempts to resist. You are at your station when it happens, pressing out shell casings with the mindless efficiency of long practice. When the worker 3 stations down from you pulls a makeshift weapon from beneath their workstation and drives it into the overseer's throat. Before you can process what you have seen, before you can even react, 2 more workers rush the secondary overseer, bearing him to the ground with sheer numbers, their hands and improvised weapons rising and falling in a frenzy of violence. The manufactorum erupts into chaos. Some workers flee, running for the exits in blind panic. Others stand frozen, unable to comprehend what they are witnessing. And still others, more than you would, have believed possible, reveal themselves as part of the uprising, producing weapons and moving with coordinated purpose to secure the exits, to disable the Vox systems, to take control of the facility. You run. You do not think, you simply react, fleeing toward the nearest exit. Behind you, you can hear screaming, the sounds of violence and death. You see workers you have labored beside for years transforming before your eyes into something else, their human features twisted by an alien fervor that burns in their eyes like fever. You make it into the corridor beyond the manufactorum, and here the scene is even worse. The uprising is not limited to your facility. It is happening everywhere simultaneously. A coordinated strike timed with precision across thousands of locations throughout the Hive. The corridors are choked with people, some fleeing, others fighting, and still others who have revealed their true nature as cultists. And among the cultists, you see things that cannot be, should not be. Figures that are too tall, too thin, their movements fluid and wrong. You catch glimpses of extra limbs, of distended heads, of skin that seems to ripple and shift. These are the earlier generation hybrids, the ones who could not pass for fully human, now freed from their hiding places and eager to participate in the uprising they have dreamed of for so long. You think of your family, your spouse and children in your Hab unit kilometers away, and you begin to fight your way through the chaos toward them. The journey that usually takes 45 minutes stretches into hours as you navigate through corridors that have become war zones. Enforcers of the Adeptus Arbites, those who have not already been killed or revealed as cultists themselves, fight desperate holding actions at key choke points, trying to maintain some semblance of order. You see an enforcer cut down by gunfire, his armor unable to withstand the concentrated fire of a dozen cultists armed with stolen lace guns. You see civilians torn apart by hybrid monstrosities that move with terrifying speed and strength. You see things that will haunt your dreams for the rest of your life, however long that may be. By the time you reach your Hab block, it has already been overrun. The corridors are filled with the dead, and the walls are marked with strange symbols painted in blood, sigils that hurt to look at, that seem to writhe and shift when you try to focus on them. You find your Hab unit, the door torn from its hinges, and inside. Your spouse is dead, killed defending your children. Your youngest child is dead too, their small body broken by violence you cannot bear to examine too closely. Your older child is gone, taken by the cultists, for purposes you dare not imagine. You fall to your knees in the ruins of your home, your hands covered in your spouse's blood, your mind unable to process the magnitude of what has been taken from you. The world has ended. Everything you worked for, everything you cared about, everything that gave your existence meaning, has been destroyed in a matter of hours. And this is only the beginning. Across the Hive, similar scenes are playing out in countless Hab blocks, manufactorums, and administrative centers. The Genestealer cult has struck with devastating effect, targeting the infrastructure and personnel necessary to mount an effective defense. Power stations are seized or sabotaged. Water purification plants fall under cult control. Communication hubs are destroyed or captured, cutting off different sections of the Hive from each other and preventing coordinated response. The Planetary Defense Force attempts to mobilize, but finds itself fighting battles on 1,000 fronts simultaneously. Units deployed to restore order in one district find themselves ambushed from unexpected directions. Officers discover that their subordinates are cultists, turning their weapons on their own comrades. Armored vehicles are disabled by sabotage before they can even leave their motor pools. The PDF commander, a veteran of numerous campaigns against orcs and chaos cultists, has never faced an enemy like this. The cultists do not fight like normal insurgents. They show no fear of death, advancing into gunfire with a fanatical zeal that is unnerving even to experienced soldiers. They coordinate their actions with impossible precision, as if guided by a single will, and they seem to know the positions of PDF forces before those forces even arrive. What the commander does not know, what he cannot know, is that the cultists are indeed guided by a single will. The brood mind, the psychic gestalt that connects all members of the cult through their patriarch, allows them to function as a single organism with billions of hands. They share information instantaneously, coordinate their actions without need for vox communication, and adapt to changing tactical situations with inhuman speed. High in the spires, the governor finally accepts the truth that his advisors have been trying to make him understand. This is not a simple uprising of discontented workers. This is not even a chaos cult rebellion like those that have plagued other worlds. This is something far worse, a Xenos infiltration that has compromised the Hive from top to bottom, and it is only the prelude to something even more terrible. He orders the activation of the Hive's void shields, massive energy barriers designed to protect against orbital bombardment. He commands the PDF to implement martial law with extreme prejudice, authorizing the use of any force necessary to put down the uprising. He sends desperate pleas for help through every remaining communication channel, knowing they will likely go unanswered, but hoping against hope that someone will hear. And he prays. The governor is not a particularly religious man, his faith more a matter of political necessity than true belief. But now he prays with a fervor he has never felt before. He prays that the emperor will protect his people, that the Adeptus Astartes will arrive to deliver them from this nightmare, that somehow, some way, they will survive what is coming. His prayers, like those of billions of others across the Hive, go unanswered. The emperor protects, the faithful say, but on this day, on this world, protection is not forthcoming. You emerge from your destroyed home, moving like a ghost through corridors that have become a charnel house. You have no destination, no plan, no purpose beyond the animal need to survive. Around you, the battle between PDF forces and cultists continues to rage, but you barely notice. You are beyond fear now, beyond horror, existing in a state of shock that shields you from the full weight of what you have experienced. You join a stream of refugees fleeing upward, seeking the imagined safety of the mid-Hive levels. Thousands make the same journey, a great migration of humanity, fleeing from the violence below, hoping that the authorities above will provide protection, sustenance, salvation. But the mid-Hive is little better. The uprising has not been limited to the manufactorum levels. Cultists have revealed themselves here too, and the fighting is just as fierce. The difference is that here, the PDF has managed to establish some defensible positions, creating fortified zones where non-infected civilians can shelter. You are processed by exhausted enforcers who check you for signs of infection, looking for the telltale marks of genetic corruption. You pass their inspection, more by luck than anything else, and are directed to a refugee center in a converted warehouse. The space is already overcrowded, thousands of people packed into a facility designed for hundreds. But you are grateful simply to be somewhere that offers the illusion of safety. Here, you learn the full scale of the catastrophe. The refugees share stories, each one more terrible than the last. Entire hab blocks have been taken over by the Armisors, cultists. Manufacturing districts that employed millions have gone silent. And there are rumors, whispered in horrified tones, of things emerging from the underhive, creatures that are neither fully human nor fully xenos, monstrosities that hunt through the darkened corridors with supernatural speed and ferocity. An old woman tells you that she saw pure strains, actual genostealers, tall and terrible with 4 clawed arms and eyeless faces that somehow see everything. A manufactorum worker swears he saw a patriarch, a thing 3 meters tall and swollen with psychic power, its presence alone enough to drive men mad with fear. A former enforcer speaks of hybrids of every generation, from those who look almost human to things that should not exist, all of them working together with unified purpose. And then someone asks the question that everyone has been avoiding. Why? Why would these cultists, many of them born in the Hive, many of them with families and lives just like everyone else, turn against their own kind with such violence? What could possibly motivate such complete betrayal? A man in the robes of a minor ecclesiarchy priest provides the answer, his voice hollow with despair. The cultists, he explains, worship the Tyranids as gods. They believe the Hive fleet is coming to save them, to elevate them, to grant them ascension into something greater than mere humanity. They have been preparing for this moment for generations, and they genuinely believe that when the Tyranids arrive, they will be rewarded for their faithful service. The reality, the priest continues, is far darker. The Tyranids do not reward, they do not spare. They consume everything, including those who worship them. The cultists are tools, nothing more, used to weaken the Hive's defenses and make the eventual consumption easier. When the Tyranids come, the cultists will die just like everyone else, their biomass harvested and repurposed like all the other organic matter on the world. This knowledge that the cultists are not only traitors, but fools who doom themselves along with everyone else, somehow makes it worse. There is no rationality to it, no logic that can be understood or negotiated with. It is simply madness, wrapped in religious fervor and directed toward an ending that can only mean death for all. You spend 3 days in the refugee center, 3 days during which the fighting continues to rage throughout the Hive. The PDF makes some progress, retaking key districts and establishing secure perimeters, but the cost is staggering. Thousands of soldiers die in brutal close-quarters combat. Millions of civilians are caught in the crossfire or fall victim to the cultists' knives. And then, on the 4th day, everything changes. The Vox systems, silent for days, suddenly crackle to life with a message from the Hive's Defensive Operations Center. All citizens are to seek shelter immediately. All windows, where they exist, are to be shuttered. All non-essential personnel are to vacate the upper levels and move to hardened shelters in the mid-Hive. You do not understand why. Not at first. But then you hear it. A sound that filters down through kilometers of rockcrete and steel. A sound that should not be possible to hear through such barriers. It is a sound like thunder, like the world itself groaning under impossible weight, like the sky screaming. The Tyranids have arrived. The sky burns. The first mycetic spores hit the Hive's upper atmosphere, traveling at speeds that turn them into meteors, their organic hulls burning with friction heat as they plunge toward the surface. They are not elegant or subtle. They are kinetic bombardment, disguised as biological invasion, massive pods of living tissue designed to survive atmospheric entry and deliver their cargo intact to the ground below. The Hive's void shields, designed to protect against orbital bombardment, prove woefully inadequate against this assault. The shields were built to stop energy, weapons, and explosive ordnance, not living projectiles that can adapt their trajectory mid-flight, that can sense the gaps in the defensive network and exploit them with unnatural precision. The first wave consists of hundreds of spores, each one the size of a transport vehicle, each one containing either smaller organisms ready to spread throughout the Hive or specialized bioforms designed to assess the defenses and identify weaknesses. They slam into the upper levels of the Hive, into the spires where the nobility live, and the destruction is immediate and catastrophic. You feel the impacts even kilometers below, great shuddering jolts that make the entire structure shake, that send cracks racing through walls and ceilings. The lights flicker and fail as power conduits are severed. Emergency lighting kicks in, bathing everything in a hellish red glow that seems appropriate for what is unfolding. The second wave is larger, thousands of spores falling like rain across the Hive and the surrounding ash wastes. These ones carry the vanguard organisms, the Tyranid creatures designed to spread terror and begin the work of destabilizing the planet's biosphere. Lictors, tall and terrible, with chameleonic skin and killing claws. gargoyles, winged horrors that fill the sky with their screeching cries. Hormagaunts, scuttling nightmare creatures that move with insectile speed and attack with mindless ferocity. But it is what the spores release into the atmosphere that is truly terrible. Microscopic organisms, billions upon billions of them, designed to begin the process of transforming the planet into something more suitable for Tyranid consumption. They are xenophagic viruses and bacteria, designer organisms that can survive in almost any environment and reproduce at frightening speed. These microscopic invaders have multiple purposes. Some attack the planet's native plant life, wherever such things still exist, altering their genetic structure to make them grow faster, larger, drawing nutrients from deep in the soil and concentrating them in easily harvested biomass. Others begin to change the atmospheric composition, breaking down complex molecules and releasing compounds that will eventually make the air unbreathable for humans, but perfect for Tyranid organisms. Still others are designed to attack animal life directly, including humans. They enter through the lungs with every breath, multiply in the bloodstream, and begin to break down cellular walls. The effects are not immediate, but within days, those exposed will begin to experience hemorrhaging, organ failure, and a slow, agonizing death as their bodies are literally dissolved from within. The Hive's defensive batteries, massive laser cannons, and missile arrays, positioned on the upper levels, open fire at the descending spores with everything they have. The sky becomes a light show of lasfire and exploding ordnance, and many spores are destroyed before they can reach the surface. But there are too many. For every spore that is shot down, 5 more make it through, and each one that survives releases its cargo into the hive. In the refugee center where you have taken shelter, panic spreads as the structure shudders from repeated impacts. The ceiling cracks, and you can see daylight through the breach, actual sunlight that you have not seen since childhood, filtered through a sky that has turned the sickly purple-green of Tyranid corruption. An enforcer tries to maintain order, shouting that everyone must remain calm, that the PDF has the situation under control, that reinforcements are coming. But his voice is lost in the screaming, and when part of the ceiling collapses, crushing dozens of refugees beneath tons of falling debris, what little order remained breaks down completely. You flee with the crowd, a stampede of terrified humanity pouring into the corridors beyond. You have no destination, no plan. You simply run because running feels like the only thing you can do. Around you, others do the same, and the corridors become choked with people pushing and shoving and trampling those who fall. You emerge into a larger chamber, some kind of cargo transfer station, and here you see your first Tyranid. It is a Hormagaunt, standing 3 meters tall on reverse-jointed legs, its body a nightmare fusion of insect and reptile, and something else entirely alien. Its head is eyeless, but somehow it sees you, turning in your direction with predatory focus. Its scything claws, each one longer than your forearm, gleam with some kind of organic secretion that steams in the air. The Hormagaunt screams, a sound that is not quite animal and not quite anything else, and charges. It covers the distance between you in heartbeats, moving with a speed that seems impossible for something its size. You throw yourself to the side, more by instinct than plan, and the creature's claws miss you by centimeters, close enough that you feel the wind of their passage. The refugees behind you are not so lucky. The Hormagaunt crashes into the crowd like a scythe through wheat, its claws rising and falling in a frenzy of killing. Blood sprays in arcs across the walls. Screams fill the air, and still more refugees pour into the chamber, fleeing from other horrors in other corridors, running straight into the killing zone. You scramble to your feet and run, not looking back, not thinking, just running. Behind you, the screaming continues, joined by more alien shrieks as additional Hormagaunts enter the chamber. You can hear the wet sounds of tearing flesh, the crack of breaking bones, the gurgling cries of the dying, you find yourself in a maintenance shaft, some kind of access tunnel for the hive's infrastructure. It is cramped and dark, but it leads away from the killing, and right now, that is all that matters. You crawl through the tunnel, your hands and knees scraping on metal grating, your breath coming in ragged gasps. The tunnel opens into a service bay, and here you find other survivors, perhaps 20 people huddled in the darkness, trying to stay quiet, trying to stay hidden. They have barricaded the entrances with whatever they could find, creating crude fortifications from cargo containers and industrial equipment. An older man, his uniform marking him as some kind of mid-level administrator, takes charge with the kind of authority that comes from a lifetime of managing others. He organizes watch rotations, inventories the meager supplies they have, and tries to establish some kind of plan for survival. But even as he works, you can see the fear in his eyes, the knowledge that this sanctuary is temporary at best. You spend the rest of that day in the service bay, listening to the sounds of battle echoing through the hive's infrastructure. There are explosions, distant but powerful enough to make the walls shake. There is gunfire, the distinctive crack of laser guns, and the heavier roar of bolters. There are screams, human and alien both, a constant background noise that never quite stops. As night falls, not that you can see the difference in the darkness of the service bay, the sounds change. The gunfire becomes less frequent, the explosions more sporadic. But the alien sounds grow louder, closer. You can hear things moving through the corridors beyond your barricades, things that scratch at the walls and test the barriers with inhuman patience. The old administrator tries to keep everyone calm, but his authority is fragile, held together only by the shared need for organization in the face of chaos. When one of the survivors, a young woman barely out of adolescence, begins to sob uncontrollably, he tries to comfort her, but his platitudes ring hollow. What comfort can be offered when the world is ending? You try to sleep, but it is impossible. Every sound makes you jump. Every shadow seems to move with malevolent purpose. You find yourself thinking about your family, about your spouse and children. Dead, now, and perhaps lucky for it. At least their suffering is over. You are still here, still trapped in this nightmare, and you have no idea how long you can endure it. The second day brings a new horror. The atmospheric contamination has begun to take effect. Those who breathed the spore-laden air during the initial bombardment start to show symptoms. It begins with coughing, a wet, hacking sound that brings up blood. Then comes the fever, burning through bodies already weakened by stress and lack of food. Finally, the hemorrhaging begins, blood weeping from every orifice as cellular structure breaks down. In the confined space of the service bay, disease spreads quickly. The administrator tries to quarantine the sick, but there is nowhere to put them, no way to separate them from the healthy. Within hours, half your group is showing symptoms. Within a day, most of them are dead, their bodies piled in a corner because there is nowhere else to put them. You are one of the lucky ones, if such a term has any meaning anymore. You show no symptoms, your exposure to the contamination apparently minimal. But you watch others die in agony, and you know that your immunity is likely temporary. Sooner or later, the spores will find you too. Throughout the hive, this scene is repeated countless times. Millions die from the atmospheric contamination alone, their bodies dissolving from within, their deaths agonizing and inevitable. The PDF tries to distribute respirators and sealed environment suits, but there are not nearly enough to go around, and many of those they do have malfunction or are damaged in the fighting. The Tyranid organisms, meanwhile, are establishing themselves throughout the hive. Lictors stalk the corridors, their chameleonic skin making them nearly invisible, their feeder tendrils seeking out any humans they can find to drain of knowledge and nutrients. Gargoyles nest in the upper levels, using the hive's spires as roosts from which to launch attacks on PDF positions. And the hormagaunts, those mindless killing machines, sweep through the hive in vast swarms, overwhelming defensive positions through sheer numbers. The PDF soldiers fight bravely, their laser guns cutting down dozens of the creatures. But for every Hormigaunt killed, 2 more seem to take its place. The third day brings the arrival of the larger bioforms, carnifexes, massive armored creatures that serve as living tanks, smash through the Hive's walls as if they were paper. Warriors, tall and terrible, direct the smaller organisms with cold intelligence, their minds linked to the Hive mind and serving as synaptic nodes that coordinate the attack. And with these larger creatures come the real terror. The PDF's heavy weapons, plasma cannons and lascannons that could destroy armored vehicles, prove only partially effective against Tyranid bioforms that can adapt and evolve in real time. A weapon that kills carnifexes one day finds the creatures resistant to it the next. There, carapaces having thickened or altered to deflect the specific type of damage. The governor, still barricaded in his palace high in the main spire, receives reports of the carnage unfolding below. Entire districts have gone silent. Millions are dead or missing. The PDF is fighting desperate holding actions, but losing ground with every hour. And worst of all, the Genestealer cults, which had seemed to go quiet after the initial uprising, are now active again, attacking PDF positions from behind, sabotaging defenses, and generally making coordinated resistance impossible. He makes the decision that no planetary governor ever wants to make. He sends out a final message on all remaining channels, a message that he knows will likely never be received by anyone who could help. The message is simple. The Hive world is under Tyranid attack. Defenses are failing, immediate military assistance is required, or all will be lost. The message repeats on an endless loop, broadcast into the void on the phone. Slim hope that some passing vessel might receive it, that some Imperial Navy patrol might be close enough to intervene. But in his heart, the governor knows the truth. They are alone. The shadow in the warp blocks all astropathic communication. Even if a rescue force was dispatched immediately, it would take weeks to arrive, and they do not have weeks. They probably do not even have days. The desperate defense. In the command bunker deep beneath the primary hive, Marshal Tyran of the Planetary Defense Force stares at tactical displays that tell a story of mounting catastrophe. The hololithic projections show the hive in cross-section, and nearly a third of it is highlighted in red, indicating areas that have fallen to the Tyranid advance or are no longer in contact with command. Marshal Tyran is a career soldier, a man who has spent 40 years in the PDF, rising through the ranks through a combination of competence and political acumen. He has fought orcs, put down chaos cult, uprisings, and defended against Dark Elder raids. But he has never faced an enemy like this. The Tyranids do not follow conventional military doctrine. They do not have supply lines to cut or command structures to decapitate. They do not retreat when faced with superior firepower, and they do not require rest or resupply. They simply advance, constantly and relentlessly, adapting to whatever resistance they encounter, and overwhelming it through a combination of numbers, adaptability, and sheer biological horror. His forces, once numbering in the millions, have been reduced by half in the first 3 days of fighting. Some casualties are from combat, cut down by Tyranid claws, or dissolved by the bioweapons that many of the larger organisms carry. Others are from desertion, soldiers who threw down their weapons and fled when faced with horrors their training had never prepared them for. And then there are the cultists, the Genestealer cult. Uprising cost him tens of thousands of troops in the initial chaos, and now those same cultists are fighting alongside the Tyranids, their knowledge of the Hive's layout and defenses making them devastatingly effective as guides and saboteurs. He has had to implement brutal security measures, executing suspected cultists on sight, but he knows that more lurk hidden among his own forces, waiting for the moment to strike. His communication systems crackle with reports from across the Hive, each one worse than the last. A company of PDF troopers holding the central processing plant has been overrun by a wave of Hormigants estimated at 10,000 strong. The defensive batteries in the northern spire have gone silent, their crews likely dead or fled. A Carnifex has broken through into the mid-Hive levels and is currently rampaging through residential districts, killing everything in its path. Marshal Tyran makes his decisions with the cold efficiency of long experience. He orders a tactical retreat from untenable positions, consolidating his forces into defensible strongpoints. He authorizes the use of the Hive's stockpile of promethium for mass firebombing operations, knowing that such weapons will kill civilians along with Tyranids, but seeing no alternative. He requests that all remaining reserves be mobilized, including the barely trained conscripts who were recruited from the refugee centers. But he knows, even as he gives these orders, that they are buying time at best. The Tyranids are not being defeated. They are barely being slowed. Without reinforcements, without support from off-world, the Hive will fall. It is not a question of if, but when. In the mid-Hive levels, PDF Sergeant Kavos leads what remains of her platoon through corridors that have become a war zone. They are down to 22 soldiers from an original strength of 50, and every one of them shows the strain of 3 days of constant combat. Their uniforms are torn and bloodstained, their eyes are hollow with exhaustion and trauma. Their hands shake when they reload their laser guns, but they are still fighting, still trying to hold the line, still attempting to create safe zones where civilians can shelter. Kavos is proud of them, even as she knows that their efforts are probably futile. They are moving through what was once a commercial district, shops and small businesses that catered to the mid-Hive's middle class. Now, it is a ruin. The shops have been looted or destroyed. Bodies lie everywhere, civilians who are caught in the crossfire or targeted by cultist attacks. The air is thick with smoke from fires that burn unchecked, and the distinctive smell of death is everywhere. Kavos's Vox unit crackles with a report from the scout she sent ahead. He has found a group of civilians barricaded in a warehouse, perhaps 200 of them, but there are Tyranids nearby, a pack of hormagaunts that seems to be hunting through the district methodically. The civilians need evacuation, but attempting it will draw the hormagaunts' attention. She makes the decision without hesitation. They will extract the civilians. It is what they are here for, what they have sworn to do. She orders her platoon into defensive positions, setting up overlapping fields of fire, placing her heavy weapon team in a position where they can provide covering fire. The evacuation begins, civilians streaming out of the warehouse and moving toward a safer location several hundred meters away. Everything goes smoothly for the first few minutes. Then, the hormagaunts arrive. They come around the corner in a wave of chitin and claws, moving faster than seems possible, their eyeless faces somehow tracking the humans with perfect precision. Kavos's platoon opens fire, laser guns cutting through the air in precise volleys. The first rank of hormagaunts goes down, their bodies smoking from las burns, but the ones behind simply leap over their fallen kin and continue the charge. The heavy weapon team fires its autocannon, the heavy shells tearing massive holes in the Tyranid ranks. But there are so many of them, more than Kavos has ever seen in one place. She realizes with sickening certainty that this is not a hunting pack. This is a proper swarm, and her platoon has walked into the middle of it. She orders a fighting retreat, her soldiers falling back by squads while maintaining fire discipline. But the hormagaunts are faster, and they are flanking, cutting off the escape route. Kavos sees one of her troopers go down, dragged into the mass of aliens and torn apart in seconds. Then another falls, and another. The civilians are screaming, running in panic, and the hormagaunts follow, their killing instincts driving them toward the easiest prey. Kavos makes a decision that will haunt her for the rest of her life, however long that may be. She orders her remaining soldiers to focus their fire on the hormagaunts pursuing the civilians, effectively using her own troops as bait to buy the civilians time to escape. It works, but the cost is terrible. Her platoon is reduced to 7 soldiers by the time the last civilian makes it to safety. 7 out of the 50 who started this mission, out of the hundreds who were in her company when the invasion began. She leads her survivors into a fortified position, a strong point that the PDF has established in what was once a transit hub. Here, she finds other units in similar condition, remnants of platoons and companies that have been ground down by constant combat. The overall commander, a major she does not recognize, is trying to organize some kind of coordinated defense, but it is clear that he is overwhelmed by the scale of the disaster. That night, Kavos and her remaining soldiers huddle in a storage room, trying to rest while they can. They speak little, each lost in their own thoughts, their own memories of comrades lost. One of her troopers, a young man who cannot be more than 18, breaks down crying, and Kavos lets him. There is no point in maintaining discipline when the world is ending. In the lower Hive, where the fighting has been fiercest, entire districts have been abandoned by the PDF. The soldiers simply do not have the numbers to defend everything, and they have been forced to make brutal decisions about what can be held and what must be sacrificed. Those civilians left behind in these zones face a choice between staying put and hoping to hide from the Tyranids, or trying to flee upward to areas still under PDF control. Most choose to flee, joining the great waves of refugees that clog the Hive's arterial corridors, slowing to a crawl the already difficult movement of military forces and supplies. Among these refugees, you continue to survive through a combination of luck and desperate determination. You have joined a group of perhaps 50 people, all of whom have similar stories of loss and trauma. You move together, reasoning that there is safety in numbers, though whether this is actually true remains to be seen. Your group is led by a former ganger from the Underhive, a woman named Selka, who knows the Hive's hidden ways, the maintenance shafts and forgotten passages that most citizens do not even know exist. She guides you through routes that avoid both the Tyranid swarms and the PDF checkpoints, the latter because she does not trust the military to protect refugees when their own survival is in doubt. You traverse sections of the Hive you have never seen before, moving through industrial zones and storage facilities, through collapsed sections where you must climb over rubble, through chambers filled with machinery whose purpose you cannot even guess. And everywhere you go, you see evidence of the catastrophe unfolding. Bodies, both human and Tyranid. Damage to the Hive's structure, cracks and holes that were never there before. And the smell, the pervasive stench of death and decay that grows stronger with every hour. On the 5th day, your group encounters something that changes everything. You are moving through an old cargo bay when you hear sounds of combat ahead. Selka signals for everyone to stop, to stay quiet, and she moves forward to investigate. She returns minutes later, her face pale. Ahead, she reports, there is a PDF unit engaged in combat with Tyranids. But they are not alone. With them, fighting alongside the human soldiers, are Space Marines. This news spreads through your group like electricity. The Adeptus Astartes, the Emperor's Angels of Death, have arrived. Perhaps there is hope after all. Perhaps they can turn the tide, drive back the Tyranid invasion, save what remains of the Hive. You move forward cautiously, and through the gaps in the cargo containers, you see them. They are massive, each one standing over 2 meters tall in their power armor, moving with a grace that seems impossible for such large figures. Their armor is painted in blue and white, marked with icons and honors that speak of countless battles and ancient victories. You recognize them from propaganda posters and Imperial doctrine lessons. Ultramarines, the exemplars of the Adeptus Astartes, sons of the Primarch Reboot Guilliman himself. There are perhaps 20 of them, a single squad, and they are systematically annihilating the Tyranid forces arrayed against them. Their bolters speak with a distinctive crack boom, each shot placing a mass reactive shell precisely where it will do the most damage. When the Tyranids close to melee range, the Space Marines meet them with chainswords and power weapons, cutting through chitin armor as if it were paper. You watch a Carnifex, one of the massive armored creatures that you have seen smash through rockcrete walls, charge a Space Marine. The Marine does not retreat or even seem concerned. He plants his feet, raises his bolter, and puts 3 shots into the creature's head at point-blank range. The Carnifex's head explodes in a shower of gore, and the massive body crashes to the ground at the Marine's feet. He steps over it without pausing and continues firing at the next target. The battle lasts perhaps 10 minutes from start to finish, and when it is over, dozens of Tyranid corpses litter the cargo bay. Not a single Space Marine has fallen. They begin to reload their weapons with mechanical efficiency, and their squad sergeant notices your group watching from behind the cargo containers. He approaches, and up close, he is even more intimidating. His armor is scarred from countless battles, his helmet displaying a stern death's head insignia. When he speaks, his voice is amplified by his armor's vox systems, resonating with authority. He identifies himself as Sergeant Marius of the Ultramarines 3rd Company. His squad was deployed to the Hive when the invasion began, part of a larger force that is attempting to evacuate key personnel and establish defensive strongpoints. He informs you that there is an evacuation zone being set up in the upper mid-Hive, that civilian refugees are being gathered there for potential off-world evacuation. He provides specific coordinates and directions, then warns that time is short. The Tyranids are advancing faster than anticipated, and the window for evacuation is narrowing rapidly. His squad must continue their mission, but he advises you to reach the evacuation zone as quickly as possible. With that, the Space Marines are gone, moving with purpose toward their next objective. You are left staring after them, struck by the contrast between their power and confidence and your own helplessness. But Sergeant Marius's words have given you something you had lost: purpose. There is an evacuation zone. There is a chance, however slim, of getting off this doomed world. Selka immediately begins planning the route to reach the coordinates the Space Marine provided. It will require moving back upward, traversing some of the most dangerous sections of the Hive, areas where Tyranid presence is likely to be heavy. But what choice do you have? Staying here means certain death. At least if you try to reach the evacuation zone, you have a chance. Your group sets out immediately, moving as quickly as they dare through the Hive's labyrinthine passages. You see more signs of the Space Marine presence, areas where defensive positions have been established, where Tyranid corpses are piled like cordwood. But you also see evidence that even the Adeptus Astartes cannot be everywhere. There are sections where the Tyranids have broken through, where civilian bodies lie testament to the failure of protection. As you climb higher into the Hive, the nature of the destruction changes. Here, in the mid-Hive levels, the damage is from more than just combat. The atmospheric contamination has taken a severe toll. You pass entire residential blocks where everyone died from the spore-borne plague, their bodies lying in their homes or collapsed in the corridors, blood leaking from every orifice. You also begin to see signs of something else, something that fills you with a different kind of horror. The Tyranids are not just killing, they are changing things, transforming the environment to suit their needs. You see walls that have been covered in some kind of organic growth, purple-green and pulsing with unnatural life. You see chambers where the floor has been torn up and strange, fleshy structures have been planted, already beginning to grow into something larger. These are the capillary towers in their earliest stages, though you do not know it yet. You do not understand that these strange growths are designed to eventually reach the surface, to connect with the Hive ships in orbit, and pump the planet's biomass upward to be consumed and recycled. All you know is that the sight of them fills you with instinctive revulsion, with the knowledge that they are wrong, alien, an infection spreading through the Hive like a cancer. On the 7th day of the invasion, you finally reach the evacuation zone. It is a massive chamber, some kind of former commercial center that has been converted into a staging area. PDF soldiers man barricades around the perimeter, and you can see several Space Marines coordinating the operation, their presence both reassuring and unsettling. There are thousands of civilians already here, perhaps tens of thousands, all waiting for transport off-world. But as you join the crowd, as you find a space to sit and rest for the first time in days, you hear the conversations around you, and your fragile hope begins to crumble. There are not enough ships. The number of vessels available for evacuation is woefully inadequate for the millions who still survive in the Hive. At best, perhaps 10% of those who make it to the evacuation zone will actually be able to leave. The rest will be left behind when the Tyranids break through the defenses. The selection process, you learn, is being managed by the Space Marines and senior PDF officers. They are prioritizing based on usefulness to the Imperium. Those with critical skills, those with genetic markers indicating compatibility for Space Marine recruitment, those from noble families who might have political value, they will be saved. The rest, the common workers and refugees who have no particular value beyond their existence, will likely be abandoned. You realize with sick certainty that you fall into that second category. You were a manufactorum worker, replaceable, one of billions doing the same job on thousands of worlds. There is no reason to save you. There is no reason to give you a place on one of those precious ships. And yet, what else can you do but wait? Perhaps there will be more ships than expected. Perhaps the selection criteria will change. Perhaps through some miracle, you will be chosen. So you wait, along with thousands of others, hoping against hope for salvation that will probably never come. Meanwhile, the battle for the Hive continues to rage. The collapse of civilization by the 10th day of the invasion, the pretense of organized resistance has largely collapsed. The PDF still fights in scattered pockets, and the Space Marines continue their operations. But the Hive as a whole has descended into chaos. The thin veneer of Imperial civilization has been stripped away, revealing the savage desperation beneath. In the lower Hive levels, those areas not yet overrun by the Tyranids have devolved into anarchy. With no authority to enforce order, with no expectation of rescue or survival, humanity has reverted to its most base instincts. Gangs fight over dwindling supplies of food and water. Strong prey upon the weak. The old social hierarchies have inverted, with those who were once respected now targets for violence and theft. You hear stories from new arrivals at the evacuation zone, tales of horror that have nothing to do with the Tyranids. A refugee camp in the lower levels that descended into cannibalism when food ran out. A water reclamation plant where workers murdered each other for control of the last clean water. A noble family's palatial hab complex that was stormed by a mob. The nobility torn apart by hands hungry for revenge against years of oppression. These stories should shock you, should horrify you, but instead you feel a strange numbness. After everything you have witnessed, after all you have lost, the revelation that humans can be as monstrous as aliens feels almost expected. Civilization, it turns out, is a fragile thing, dependent on the continuity of basic services and the promise of future stability. When both are removed, when survival becomes the only imperative, the beast within emerges. The atmospheric contamination continues to worsen. The initial wave of spore-borne plague killed millions in the first days. Now, those who survived that plague face new horrors as the planet's biosphere begins to transform. The air is becoming difficult to breathe, thick with spores and chemical compounds that make every breath burn. Those without respirators or environmental suits begin to show symptoms of oxygen deprivation, their lips turning blue, their thinking becoming sluggish. The water supply, always a critical concern in a Hive city, has become actively dangerous in many districts. The Tyranid organisms have infiltrated the water reclamation plants, and the fluid that comes from the taps is now contaminated with biological agents that accelerate cellular breakdown. Those desperate enough to drink it anyway find themselves dying in agony within hours, their bodies literally dissolving from the inside out. Food becomes the most precious commodity, more valuable than gold or weapons. The Hive's vast storage facilities are running low, their stocks depleted by the disruption of normal distribution and the enormous number of refugees concentrated in smaller and smaller areas. Fights break out over scraps of corpse starch. people kill each other for a single nutrition bar. In the evacuation zone, the Space Marines impose strict rationing, their authority absolute and their methods brutal. Those caught stealing food are executed on the spot, their bodies added to the growing pile of casualties. It is harsh, perhaps unnecessarily so, but it maintains a bare minimum of order in a situation that constantly threatens to spiral into complete chaos. You receive your daily ration, a portion of grey paste that tastes of nothing and everything, and you eat it mechanically, no longer capable of feeling hunger or satisfaction, merely consuming because your body requires it. Around you, others do the same, each lost in their own private hells, each trying to hold on to some fragment of hope or purpose. In the upper levels of the Hive, in the spires where the wealthy once lived in luxury, the situation is different but no less terrible. Here, the Tyranids have established what Imperial observers would call digestion zones, areas where the process of biomass collection has begun in earnest. The castle, beautiful gardens, those carefully maintained pockets of greenery that were a symbol of the nobility's status, have been transformed into nightmares. The plants have been infected by Tyranid spores and now grow with terrible speed, their roots digging deep into the hive's foundations, their leaves and fruits swollen with nutrients extracted from the rock itself. But these are no longer plants in any recognizable sense. They are hybrid organisms, part earth flora and part alien biology, and they exist only to be harvested and consumed. Ripper swarms have begun to appear in significant numbers. These are small, maggot-like creatures that exist for one purpose: to consume biomass and return it to the reclamation pools that have begun to form throughout the hive. They flow through the corridors like living carpets, devouring everything organic in their path, from bodies to food stores to the very rats and vermin that once infested the underhive. The Rippers are not intelligent, not individually, but they are directed by the hive mind, their movements coordinated with inhuman precision. They sweep through a district systematically, missing nothing, consuming everything, and once they have gorged themselves on biomass, once their bodies are bloated to the point of immobility, they crawl to the nearest reclamation pool and throw themselves in, adding their own substance to the nutrient-rich gruel that will eventually be pumped into the hive ships above. The reclamation pools are perhaps the most horrifying aspect of the Tyranid consumption process. They start as small puddles of caustic fluid, appearing in places where Tyranid organisms have vomited up pre-digested matter, but they grow quickly, fed by a constant stream of biomass both living and dead. You see one from a distance, peering through the smoked glass of an observation window in the evacuation zone. It is enormous, filling what was once a cargo bay with viscous purple-green liquid that steams and bubbles like acid. Things move in it, partially dissolved forms that might have been human or Tyranid or something else entirely. And at the edges of the pool, you can see Rippers crawling in, their mission complete, their bodies fuel for the greater hunger. From the center of the pool, a structure is beginning to grow. It is called a capillary tower, though you do not know this, a living pipeline that will eventually reach through the hive's structure all the way to the surface and beyond, connecting to the hive ships in orbit. The tower is still small, perhaps 10 meters tall, but it grows visibly, adding height with every hour that passes. The sight fills you with a deep, existential horror. This is what awaits your world. Not mere destruction, but consumption. Every living thing, every biological component, every molecule of organic matter will be broken down and absorbed. The Tyranids will strip the planet of its biosphere, its atmosphere, its oceans, leaving behind only a barren, rock devoid of anything that could support life. And you, if you cannot escape, will be part of that process. Your body will be consumed by Rippers or dissolved in a reclamation pool. Your biomass will be pumped into a hive ship and used to create new Tyranid organisms that will go on to consume other worlds. You will become part of the enemy, your very substance repurposed for the destruction of your own species. This knowledge, This understanding of your true situation breaks something inside you. You have already lost your family, your home, your identity as a productive member of Imperial society. But this is different. This is the loss of meaning itself, the revelation that your entire existence, everything you have ever done or been, amounts to nothing more than fuel for an alien appetite. You sink to the floor of the evacuation zone, your back against a cargo container, and you begin to laugh. It is not a pleasant sound, more like sobbing than genuine mirth, but you cannot stop. Others look at you with concern or disdain, but you do not care. Let them think you mad. Perhaps you are. Perhaps madness is the only rational response to a situation like this. On the 14th day, the Tyranid assault on the evacuation zone begins. It starts with the power failing, the lights going out across the vast chamber, plunging thousands of refugees into darkness, broken only by emergency lighting and the occasional glow of a lumen strip. Then comes the sound, a scratching and scrabbling in the walls, in the ceiling, in the floor beneath your feet. The Space Marines react immediately, their enhanced senses having detected the approach of the enemy long before normal humans could. They begin organizing the PDF soldiers into defensive positions, establishing kill zones and overlapping fields of fire. But you can see the tension in their movements, the way they check and recheck their weapons, and you understand that even they are concerned about what is coming. The first breach occurs in the eastern wall, a section of rockcrete that simply explodes inward as a carnifex crashes through it. The massive creature is followed by a tide of smaller organisms, hormagaunts and termagants pouring through the gap like water through a broken dam. The PDF opens fire immediately, thousands of lasguns creating a wall of energy that cuts down the first wave of attackers. But there are more behind them, always more, and the breach continues to widen as additional carnifexes hammer at the walls. A Space Marine Devastator squad, their heavy weapons positioned on an elevated platform, opens fire with their lascannons. The powerful energy beams punch through carnifex armor, dropping the massive creatures one after another. But for every one that falls, another appears to take its place. The civilians in the evacuation zone begin to panic. There is nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. You are trapped in this chamber with thousands of others, and the Tyranids are coming. The press of bodies becomes dangerous as people surge away from the fighting, crushing those who fall, trampling children and the weak. You are caught in the crowd, lifted off your feet by the pressure of bodies around you. You fight to breathe, to maintain some space, but it is impossible. You are going to die here, you realize, not from Tyranid claws, but from being crushed by your fellow humans. Then a voice cuts through the chaos, amplified by power armor Vox systems, impossible to ignore. Civilians, hold your positions. Do not panic. The Emperor protects. It is Sergeant Marius, the Ultramarine you encountered days ago. He stands in the center of the chamber, his blue armor marked with fresh damage from recent fighting, his bolter held at the ready. Around him, other Space Marines have taken up positions, creating a line of armored giants between the civilians and the Tyranid assault. There is something about his presence, about the absolute confidence in his voice, that cuts through the panic. People stop running. The crowd begins to settle, though the fear remains palpable. You find yourself able to breathe again, able to move, and you work your way toward the center of the chamber where the Space Marines are organizing the defense. The battle continues for hours. The Tyranids attack in waves, each one larger than the last, each one testing different approaches and tactics. The Space Marines and PDF hold them back through superior firepower and tactical positioning, but casualties mount on both sides. You see PDF soldiers dragged into the mass of Tyranids, see Space Marines forced to fall back as their ammunition runs low, and still the Tyranids come, an endless tide of chitin and claws, driven by a hunger that knows no satiation, guided by an intelligence that spans light years. The consumption. By the 18th day, most of the Hive has fallen. The lower levels are completely overrun. transformed into grotesque feeding zones where Ripper swarms methodically consume everything organic. The mid-levels are contested territory, where desperate last stands are fought by PDF remnants and Space Marine squads. And the upper levels, including most of the spires, have become Tyranid nesting grounds, where larger organisms have established themselves. The evacuation zone has been relocated twice, each time retreating to a more defensible position as the previous location became untenable. The number of civilians has decreased dramatically, both from Tyranid attacks and from the simple fact that supply shipments from orbit have been intermittent at best. Without food and water, thousands have simply died, their bodies adding to the biomass that the Tyranids harvest. You have survived this long through a combination of luck and the pragmatic ruthlessness that emerges when survival is all that matters. You no longer feel guilt or remorse. You no longer question the morality of taking food from those too weak to defend it, or pushing past the injured to reach safety first. You have become what the situation demands, a survivor stripped of everything except the animal will to continue existing. The Space Marines have been reduced in number as well. Sergeant Marius and his squad are gone, their last reported position in a section of the Hive that has since gone dark. Other squads continue to fight, but their numbers dwindle with each engagement. Even the Adeptus Astartes, for all their genetic enhancement and superior equipment, have limits. From your position in the current evacuation zone, a fortified section of the upper mid-Hive, you can see through reinforced windows to the Hive structure beyond. What you see is a vision of hell that will haunt you for the rest of your life. The capillary towers have grown massive, some of them reaching heights of hundreds of meters, stretching up through the Hive structure like grotesque needles. They are living things, pulsing with organic fluids, their surfaces covered in sensory organs that track movement and heat. From their tops, you can see tendrils extending upward, reaching for the Hive's outer shell and beyond. At the base of each tower is a reclamation pool, and these have grown to incredible size. The largest ones fill entire districts, lakes of caustic fluid that bubble and steam, that glow with a sickly bioluminescence in the perpetual twilight of the Hive's interior. And the Rippers. Emperor preserve you, the Rippers are everywhere. They flow through the Hive like a living tide, consuming everything in their path. You watch them devour entire hab blocks, the structures themselves partially organic from centuries of biological buildup, all of it fuel for the insatiable hunger. The process is methodical, almost mechanical in its efficiency. The Rippers consume, they gorge themselves until they can barely move, and then they crawl to the reclamation pools and throw themselves in. The pools break down everything, Ripper and prey alike, reducing complex biological structures to their component nutrients. And the capillary towers pump this nutrient soup upward, feeding it to the Hive ships that orbit the planet. You watch as a group of humans, perhaps refugees who were trying to flee through an area already claimed by the Tyranids, stumbles into a Ripper swarm. The creatures flow over them like water, covering their bodies completely in seconds. The screaming lasts only moments before it is cut off, and when the Rippers move on, there is nothing left but bones, stripped of every molecule of organic tissue. The horror of it is not just the death, which you have seen enough of to become numb to. The horror is the efficiency, the systematic nature of the consumption. The Tyranids are not cruel. They take no pleasure in suffering. They are simply hungry, and everything they do serves that hunger with perfect, terrible efficiency. On the 20th day, the order comes to begin final evacuation procedures. The ships that have been shuttling between the full surface and orbit will make their last runs. Those who have been selected for evacuation must board immediately. Everyone else will be left behind. The selection process is brutal. Space Marines and senior PDF officers go through the refugee population, choosing individuals based on criteria that are never explained. You watch as families are torn apart, as children are taken from parents who plead and scream and beg. You watch as valuable individuals are escorted to the loading zones, while those deemed less useful are left to fend for themselves. When they come to you, you expect nothing. You have no skills that matter, no connections, no value beyond your existence as a single human among billions. But the officer who examines you pauses, studies you more carefully, then marks something on his data slate. "You have the genetic markers we're looking for," he says. "Potential Space Marine recruitment material. You're selected." You do not feel relief or joy. You feel nothing at all. You follow where directed, moving like an automaton toward the loading zones. Around you, others who have been selected do the same, each carrying whatever meager possessions they have managed to retain. The loading zone is a converted cargo bay, massive doors opening onto a landing platform where shuttles descend from orbit to collect their passengers. The process is orderly, controlled by Space Marines who brook no arguments or delays. You board a shuttle with perhaps 60 other selected individuals, and you find a seat in the cramped passenger compartment. Through a small viewport, you can see the Hive falling away as the shuttle climbs toward orbit. From this altitude, you can see the full scale of the catastrophe. The Hive is marked with fires and structural damage. You can see Tyranid organisms moving on its surface, impossibly large creatures that dwarf the buildings around them. And in orbit, you can see the Hive ships, massive organic vessels that blot out the stars. Their bioarchitecture alien and terrible. The shuttle shakes as it passes through the atmosphere, and you close your eyes against the sight. You do not want to see anymore. You do not want to witness the death of your world. The final days. The ship that receives you is an Imperial Navy transport, one of the few vessels brave or desperate enough to remain in system despite the Tyranid presence. You are processed with mechanical efficiency, assigned a berth in a crowded compartment with dozens of other refugees, given basic provisions and told to await further instructions. For the first time in weeks, you are safe. The Tyranids cannot reach you here. The shadow in the warp still presses against the minds of the ship's navigators and astropaths, but they are trained to endure such pressure, and the vessel's Geller fields provide some protection. You should feel grateful. You should feel blessed to have escaped when billions were left behind. But instead, you feel hollow, empty, as if everything that made you who you were has been stripped away, leaving only a shell that continues to function out of habit rather than purpose. In the compartment, you meet others who escaped. They share stories in quiet voices, tales of horror and loss that mirror your own. A woman who watched her children torn apart by hormagaunts. A man who saw his entire district consumed by ripper swarms. A former noble who survived by pure chance when her family's palatial estate was one of the first areas evacuated. Each story is different in its details, but identical in its essence. Each person has lost everything. Each has been fundamentally broken by what they experienced. And each struggles with the guilt of survival, the knowledge that they live only because they were deemed valuable enough to save, while millions of others were abandoned to their fates. Through the viewports, you can see the planet below. The Hive is barely visible now, a small point of light on a world that is rapidly transforming. The atmospheric processing is nearly complete. The air composition changed to suit Tyranid organisms rather than human life. The oceans are being drained, their water pumped into the Hive ship's storage organs. Even from orbit, you can see the massive capillary towers, grown so large that they pierce the atmosphere entirely, connecting the surface directly to the fleet above. A Navy officer provides briefings on the situation, though the information is heavily censored to avoid panic. The Tyranid invasion of your Hive world was not an isolated incident, he explains. Hive Fleet Leviathan has launched assaults across multiple sectors. Dozens of worlds have been attacked, and many have already fallen. The Imperium is responding, but the response is inadequate to the scale of the threat. Space Marine chapters are being deployed. Imperial Guard regiments are being redirected. Navy battle groups are engaging the Hive fleet in void combat. But the Tyranids are endless. Their numbers beyond counting. And for every bioship destroyed, more emerge from the darkness between the stars. Your world, the officer continues, has been deemed lost. The evacuation was a limited operation designed to save valuable personnel and genetic material. The bulk of the population, those billions who remained in the Hive when the evacuation ended, will be consumed. Their biomass will fuel the Hive fleet's continued advance into Imperial space. There is discussion of exterminatus, of using cyclonic torpedoes or virus bombs to sterilize the planet and deny its biomass to the Tyranids. But the Navy does not have the resources for such an operation, and even if they did, the Tyranid fleet in orbit would prevent any approach close enough to deploy such weapons, so your world will be consumed. There is no rescue coming for those left behind. There is no last-minute salvation. There is only the slow, methodical destruction of everything that existed on that planet, the reduction of billions of years of evolution and thousands of years of human civilization to nothing more than nutrients for an alien hunger. On the 27th day after the invasion began, the last capillary tower completes its growth, reaching from the deepest parts of the Hive all the way through the atmosphere to connect directly with the largest Hive ship in orbit. The biomass transfer begins in earnest, enormous quantities of organic material being pumped upward at terrifying speed. You watch from the transport ship as the planet begins to die. The atmosphere is stripped away first, sucked into the Hive ship's storage organs to be broken down for its useful compounds. The oceans follow, visible even from orbit, as vast whirlpools form where the capillary towers draw water upward with impossible force. The Hive itself begins to collapse as its foundations are consumed, as the rippers eat through support structures that have stood for millennia. You watch as entire spires topple, as kilometers-tall structures fall in clouds of dust and debris. You watch as the lights go out one by one, sections of the Hive losing power as the infrastructure is devoured. And you know that people are still alive down there, millions of them, trapped in the depths, unable to escape, waiting for death that will come in the form of ripper swarms, or atmospheric depressurization, or simply starvation, as the last food supplies are consumed. You think about the ones you left behind, not your family, who died in the initial uprising, but the others in the evacuation zone, those who were not selected, who watched you board the shuttle knowing they would never have that chance. Did they survive the final assault? Did they die fighting, or were they consumed by the rippers, their biomass added to the pools? You will never know. Their fates are lost along with everything else, erased by the hunger of the great devourer. On the 33rd day, the Tyranid fleet begins to move. The planet has been consumed as thoroughly as it is going to be. There is no atmosphere left, no oceans, no biosphere. The Hive is a ruin. Its structure collapsed into rubble. The surface is a desert of bare rock, stripped of even the topsoil that once covered it. The Hive ships, swollen with the biomass they have consumed, begin to cluster together, forming into a fleet formation. Other bioships, smaller vessels that serve various functions within the fleet, take up positions around them. And then, as you watch from the transport's viewports, they begin to move, accelerating toward the edge of the system. They leave behind a dead world. A planet that once housed 50 billion souls now supports no life at all. The cities are gone. The people are gone. The very possibility of life is gone. What remains is a tomb, a monument to the Tyranids' hunger and the Imperium's inability to protect its citizens. The transport ship begins its own journey, preparing to enter the warp and flee to safer space, the Pole. Navigators report that the shadow in the warp is beginning to lift as the Hive fleet moves away, making warp travel possible again. The ship's commander announces that they will head for a nearby fortress world, where the refugees will be processed and assigned new roles within the Imperium. You listen to these announcements with the same hollowness that has become your constant companion. You have survived. You will live to serve the Emperor in some new capacity, on some new world. You should be grateful, but gratitude requires the capacity to feel, and you are not sure you possess that anymore. Everything you were, everything you cared about, is gone. You are a ghost, a shadow of your former self, kept alive by biological momentum rather than any desire to continue. Around you, other refugees react with similar numbness. Some pray, seeking comfort in faith. Others simply stare into nothing, their eyes empty. A few talk about revenge, about joining the Imperial Guard and fighting the Tyranids, making them pay for what they took. But these are empty words, spoken more to fill the silence than from any genuine intention. As the transport ship engages its warp drives and slips into the Imperium, as the dead world falls away behind you, you find yourself thinking about the worker you used to be, the one who stood at a manufactorum press and made shell casings for bolters. That person is gone, as dead as your family, as dead as your world. What remains is something else, something new and terrible. You are a survivor of a Tyranid invasion, a witness to the consumption of an entire planet. You have seen horrors that will haunt you until the day you die, and you carry knowledge that most Imperial citizens are spared. The knowledge of just how fragile civilization is, how easily it can be stripped away, how meaningless individual life becomes when faced with a threat of such magnitude. You do not know what the future holds. You do not know where you will be sent or what you will be asked to do. But you know one thing with absolute certainty: you will never forget what happened to your world. You will carry that memory like a wound that never heals, a reminder of what was lost and why the Imperium fights so desperately against the darkness that threatens it from every direction. The transport ship travels through the warp for weeks, its Geller fields straining against the chaotic energies that press against them. You spend the time in a fugue state, barely aware of the passage of days. You eat when food is provided. You sleep when exhaustion overwhelms you, but you do not truly live. Finally, the ship emerges from the warp near a fortress world designated in Imperial records as Cadia. No, that world fell years ago. You correct yourself mentally. The ship is heading for a different fortress world, one whose name you do not recognize, in a sector you have never heard of. The refugee processing is efficient and impersonal. You are catalogued, your genetic markers recorded, your skills assessed. The officials who interview you note your selection for potential Space Marine recruitment material, but they also note your age and the psychological trauma evident in your responses. You are deemed unsuitable for Astartes recruitment, but valuable for other purposes. You are assigned to a Departamento Munitorum facility where you will work producing munitions for the Imperial Guard. It is fitting, in a way. You started your life making bolter shells, and you will continue doing so, just on a different world, in a different hive, surrounded by different people. But as you board the shuttle that will take you to your new assignment, as you look out at the fortress world below, you understand something fundamental about the Imperium and your place in it. You are replaceable. Your world was replaceable. Everything you lost could be and will be replaced by new workers, new production, new worlds. The Imperium is vast beyond comprehension, encompassing millions of worlds and quadrillions of souls. The loss of one hive world, however terrible it might seem to those who experienced it, is merely a statistic in the endless war for survival. New hives will be built, new workers will be born, and the machine will continue grinding forward, consuming lives and worlds in its desperate attempt to hold back the darkness. You are simply a cog in that machine, and if you break, another will take your place. This should fill you with despair, and perhaps it does. But it also provides a strange kind of comfort. Your suffering, your loss, your trauma, these things are individual and terrible, but they are also part of something larger. You are not alone in your grief. Across the Imperium, countless others have experienced similar losses, faced similar horrors, and continued to exist, continued to serve, because that is what is required of them. The Imperium protects, they say, but perhaps what they really mean is that the Imperium endures. Individual worlds may fall, individual lives may be snuffed out like candles in a storm, but the greater structure persists, adapting and rebuilding, continuing the eternal struggle against the manifold threats that seek to destroy humanity. Your world is gone. Your family is gone. The person you used to be is gone. but you remain. And you will continue to serve, because that is what the Imperium demands and what your existence requires. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war, and you are a soldier in that war, whether you chose to be or not. Conclusion. The story of a hive world consumed by Tyranids is, in many ways, the story of the Imperium itself in miniature. It is a tale of overwhelming threat, inadequate response, terrible sacrifice, and the brutal necessity of survival at any cost. It is a reminder that in the 41st millennium, there is no safety, no guarantee of protection, and no mercy for the weak or unlucky. The Tyranids represent perhaps the most existential threat that humanity faces in this dark age. They cannot be reasoned with or negotiated with. They do not seek territory or resources in any conventional sense. They simply hunger, and that hunger will not be satisfied until every world has been stripped bare, every living thing consumed and repurposed for the great devourer's endless advance. For those who experience a Tyranid invasion firsthand, the psychological impact is profound and permanent. The survivors carry scars that will never heal, knowledge of horrors that most Imperial citizens are mercifully spared. They have seen the fragility of civilization, felt the helplessness of facing an enemy that views them as nothing more than food. But they also embody one of the Imperium's greatest strengths, the ability to endure, to survive, to continue existing in the face of overwhelming horror. They are living testimony to humanity's resilience, proof that even the worst catastrophes cannot entirely extinguish the human spirit. The hive world that was consumed no longer exists. Its billions of inhabitants are gone, their biomass recycled into new Tyranid organisms that even now are approaching other worlds, bringing the same terror and destruction to new victims. The planet itself is a dead rock, devoid of atmosphere or life, a monument to the price of the Imperium's war for survival. But the Imperium endures. New worlds will be colonized, new hives will be built, and the cycle will continue. The war against the Tyranids, like all the Imperium's wars, has no ending in sight. It is simply the reality of existence in the 41st millennium, a reality that must be accepted and endured because the alternative is extinction. For you, the survivor, there is no going back to what was. There is no recovery, no return to normalcy. There is only moving forward, carrying your scars and your trauma, serving the Emperor, because that is what is required, because that is all that remains. In the end, the story of a hive world being consumed by Tyranids is not about heroism or victory. It is about survival in its most basic, brutal form. It is about the price that must be paid when humanity faces threats of such magnitude that individual lives become meaningless statistics. And it is a reminder that in the grim darkness of the far future, hope is a luxury few can afford, and survival is the only victory that truly matters. The Emperor protects, they say, but sometimes protection means simply continuing to exist when everything you love has been destroyed. Sometimes it means carrying the burden of survival when death would be easier. And sometimes it means accepting that your suffering has meaning only as part of a greater struggle that spans the stars and will continue long after you are gone. This is the truth that survivors of Tyranid invasions must live with. This is the price they pay for their continued existence. And this is why their stories, however terrible, must be remembered and understood. Because in knowing what they endured, we better understand the nature of the threats that the Imperium faces and the terrible necessity of the sacrifices that must be made to ensure humanity's continued survival in a universe that offers only war, death, and the faintest hope of enduring one more day. Thank you for watching this exploration of life on a hive world during a Tyranid invasion. If you found this informative, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more deep dives into Warhammer 40K lore. The Emperor protects, and your engagement helps support the continued production of this content. Until next time, May your faith in the God Emperor never waver.